For Autism Awareness Month, I would like to talk about autism things. I'm going to talk about my discovery. So, first and foremost, I am in a Facebook group for people who like Amanda Palmer. I was complaining in the Amanda Palmer group about how the sounds of people eating infuriates me. The sounds of chewing, of slurping, of scraping of plates, of all of the noises that someone can even fathomably make while eating cause me to feel homicidal. And it's been that way for most of my life. It was really bad when I was a preteen, and it's really bad now. After posting about this in the Facebook group, one of the other members said to me, are you on the spectrum? And I immediately disqualified that as a possibility because I had this misconception that autism just looked really different, that it was more quiet, that it was someone who had trouble expressing, and I don't have trouble expressing. I am always expressing. But the truth is that I'm still misunderstood. I might have so much to say, but that doesn't mean that I'm saying it right. So, after a couple Google searches, I landed upon things that were really making sense, and it all began to add up. I have absolutely no patience, so I started to talk about the fact that I believed that I was autistic immediately. My mother believed me because she knew that from the moment I was born that I wasn't like other children, and she liked it that way. I was basically an adult my entire life. Some of my close friends believed me, and some of my close friends disbelieved me so much that they haven't talked to me since I came out. Part of the problem was that I wasn't going to seek a formal diagnosis. Diagnosis is a privilege, especially in somewhere like America, where we don't necessarily have access to healthcare. Some people, their diagnosis could cost thousands of dollars. I called 2 places and I got quoted $500 to $800 for an appointment to get evaluated for autism, and that might not have even been conclusive. So I decided that I wasn't going to seek a formal diagnosis because I couldn't see myself spending $1,000 for something that I was already sure about whenever I didn't plan on seeking any further help. So time passed, and I could feel that people didn't believe me. And anyone who knows me knows how important being believed is. Feeling seen, feeling real, pleading with someone to believe me. All my life, all I have wanted was for people to believe the way that I feel and to believe my conviction about things. So I eventually did find a doctor who was affordable, and I prepared for 7 weeks all of the things that I could say about myself, what I felt would convince him to believe me. I even prepared a binder, which I didn't actually use, but when I stepped into his office, he asked me what brought me to him, and I said that I felt like an alien my entire life, and I immediately began to give him the details about how hard it is for me to manage friendships, and about how hard it is for me to relate to people, and how I feel closer to TV show characters than my friends. When I was a kid, I had no interest in kid things. I was more of an adult than a kid. And he began to ask me about my friends, what friends do you have? And I told him about my 3 friends and about all of the details that I could possibly think of about them. And while I was chattering away about these people that he doesn't know, I saw a smile come up upon his face. And I could tell in that moment that I was being believed, that he was seeing what it is that I try to explain to people, the way that my head works. So after the rest of the consultation, he gave me a piece of paper and he told me that I was right. That there was no reason to not believe me. And I don't try to rely on men for validation, but that day I was pretty glad to have met him because I had never felt more real in my life. This one word this one label, this one thing, this one way to be human. Autism describes my entire life. It describes everything that I have ever thought of. It describes how hard it is for me to bring what I experience to the outside. And maybe because I never really stopped talking, people sometimes don't believe that it's a struggle, but there are days that I cannot organize myself. You know, there are days where I have so many things that feel open-ended that it causes me to shut down because I cannot come back to reality the same way other people can. I can't cope with change the same way that a neurotypical person can. I am not able to do everything that neurotypical people can do at the same rate. That doesn't mean that I really have, you know, a disadvantage, because I think that I also have superpowers. I am hyper organized. I have a memory that allows me to remember everything that I've ever experienced. I notice patterns. I remember dates. And I could go on. I was naturally gifted in school. I can take audio pictures in my head. I can freeze something that I heard in my head and remember it exactly how I heard it. That's how I studied in school, by taking audio pictures in my head from lectures and actual pictures in my head from my notes. I can see things like that. That's one of my superpowers, you know, for my autism. And I think one thing that truly frustrates me about the late diagnosis and being believed is that a lot of the time when I tell people that I'm weird, you know, I use the word weird, they say, well, nobody's normal. And it offends me because you're right. I mean, there is no such thing as normal. But let's not pretend that there aren't people who you find to be so weird that you don't want to celebrate their differences. Don't pretend that there is only one kind of weird or two kinds of weird that you like. And that at one point or another, I have been the wrong kind of weird to so many people. Whenever I was 12 years old, I was obsessed with Freddy Krueger when all of the other girls in my grade were obsessed with vampires and Harry Potter and whatever else, you know, was age appropriate, that was available, that was relatable to them. And whenever I chased people down the hallway saying something from Freddy Krueger, nobody was celebrating my differences. The only people that celebrated who I was, that made me an individual, were a few sympathetic teachers. I always felt closer to my teachers than to my peers until I got a little bit older. But when I say that I'm weird, I don't mean, oh, I'm just so weird and different, you know, I'm not like other girls. I'm literally not like other girls. And I think that trying to say everybody is weird is really drastically underselling so many of the differences that people have. Essentially, what I'm saying is just because now more people like things that they consider to be unconventional, or more people are becoming hyper fixed on things than what used to be considered normal, doesn't mean that everybody fits into the same box of weirdness. And everybody's weirdness can be sorted into different kinds of boxes, and society determines which ones of those we should talk about and which ones of those we should try to rub out, you know? And that is what has separated me from people my entire life, was that aside from the special people that I would find who wanted to understand me, I was the kind of person that got overlooked despite my loudness, because I was the kind of weird that people wanted to figure out how to get rid of. And people can argue with me and say that's not true. You know, people can tell me that this isn't actually how it was, but I lived that life. I experienced it, and I knew what people were thinking about me even when I didn't. At the end of the day, finding out that I have autism just gave me another word to help me describe the large person that I am. I am large, I contain multitudes, I am large in every way. And I think that seeing that this idea, this thing that I am, this thing that I have been and always will always be part of my explanations. And adding that to the mix made me feel more alive than ever. And it might not seem like it's important to everyone else, but now I no longer tell people, oh, I can't drive. I tell people that I'm not neurotypical, and that creates a problem where it makes it too difficult for me to learn how to drive safely. And instead of people saying, oh, well, you could get your license if you tried, people just accept it and they don't really ask questions because it makes them nervous. And I finally feel like I can say, well, today I'm having a really bad day because I can't organize all of the lists in my head, and I can't stop thinking about a song that I liked when I was 10, and I can't stop thinking about this one food that I don't have. And this used to feel so hard to say to people, but now I think that when I say it to my friends that have accepted that this autism thing is real and it's solid and it explains everything. So when I tell one of my friends now that I can't focus because I have too many lists in my head, or that I can't focus because I really want a garlic hamburger, they believe me. They get it. And maybe there isn't really anything that they could say or do at that moment because there's nothing they can do to help. But in that moment, I take their offering. They say, here's my understanding. Here is the understanding that I could give someone neurotypical for their problem, but I have shaped it to fit yours. So while I might not be able to ever experience exactly what you're feeling, here is my understanding. That is what the diagnosis, the discovery, and the word autism has given me. The ability to accept an understanding from other people that actually shapes me. I'm not sure how much I want to talk about in these videos, if anyone's going to watch them, or if anybody has questions for me that they would like me to talk about. So, moving forward, if you ever have any questions about my own experience, I am more than happy to talk about it. I cannot speak for anyone else on the spectrum, especially anyone who has higher support needs. But I can give anyone some insight into my head and to what it's like to be me. I'm not saying that it sucks to be me, because honestly, some days being me is really fantastic. But I appreciate all of the understanding that has been newly offered to me in this past year. And I appreciate all of the friends who are constantly trying to be there for me, even whenever I don't make myself available to be there for.